First, I would like to introduce Bill Belknap. Bill Belknap has been with the City of Moscow for a number of years, and he's going to give us an update, like Pete Dickinson's, in relation to the City of Moscow. Last week, I came to a meeting with the Inland Northwest Partners, and one of the things that came out of the meeting that I thought was most remarkable was 3,600 people drive from Moscow to Pullman every day to go to work and back. So we are the Palouse. It is a region. It's an amazing statistic. Take it from there, Bill.
Okay, I think we're up. Well, thank you first for having the opportunity to speak with you today. As Shelley may have mentioned or may have been announced, Jeff Jones was also going to be on the docket this afternoon, and I don't think I'm nearly as entertaining to listen to as Jeff is for those that have listened to Jeff present. But I'll cover some of the information that he would have covered looking at the local economy and how it compares to what's playing out in the national, state, and regional economy. So just to provide a little bit of background, the Community Development Department here with the City of Moscow is responsible for the administration of land use development and construction activities within the City of Moscow. We cover two broad divisions, including planning and building, and also provide a variety of other city functions, whether it's related to economic development, grant writing, code administration, and other special projects as we get assigned. I thought it'd be helpful to take a look at some of the background of what's played out in the national recession and how that relates to what's happened at the state level, and again correlate that to what's happening locally. And I think a lot of the information that we'll have on job numbers really correlate to the construction activity and investment that we're seeing in Pullman in a variety of industries right now. So as everybody's probably aware and tired of hearing, over the course of this Great Recession, there's been a total of 8.7 million jobs that have been lost during this time period. I think the only two states that really didn't experience any significant job loss were Alaska and North Dakota with the energy industries, and have continued to grow and expand since that time. Of the 48 states, of the other 48 states, I should say, 12 have regained the pre-recession job levels by September of last year. And I think just recently it was announced in the job reports from May of this year that the U.S. has reached the 2008 employment level. What is remarkable is that it took 2 years essentially for those job losses to occur during the start of the recession in 2008, and it has taken 4 years to recover back up to that pre-recession level in 2008, not taking into consideration job growth that would normally have occurred during that time frame. Certainly the sectors that have been hit most significantly include construction and manufacturing, and the energy industries and mining and natural resources are those that have grown most during that time period. Just to take a look at the state of the nation, after the beginning of the recession in 2008, during the business cycle in April of 2009, essentially the entire nation was red. Every state was in a position of recession at that time period, and that was really indicative of what's occurring at the time. So doesn't show it very well. Looking at this cycle in April of 2012, two states, North Dakota and Alaska, began expansion. The majority of the states were in recovery, and at that point in time, there were 4 states that were at risk of moving back into recession, including Maine, Wisconsin, Illinois, Mississippi, and Rhode Island. Moving ahead 1 year, in April of 2013, we had 6 states in expansion, including the Dakotas, Oklahoma, Texas, Alaska, and Utah. And 7 states were at risk, including Maine, Wisconsin, Illinois, Rhode Island, Alabama, Delaware, and Connecticut. Later in November, additional states moved in. We had 10 states that were in expansion, including the Dakotas, Oklahoma, Texas, Alaska, Utah, and Colorado, Nebraska, Iowa, and Massachusetts, and those states were in a position of risk. And we've, since that time, looking at the business cycle in March of 2014 of this year, we've had 1 state added, so there are 11 states that are currently in a position of expansion. So Minnesota joined the states that were in expansion at that time, and the rest of the states nationally are still in a position of recovery from the recession. Looking at the state level, the June 2014 Idaho Department of Commerce Labor Job Report indicated through the 12 months that ended September of 2013, Idaho recovered 21,000 of the 56,000 jobs that it lost in the course of the recession. And while that recovery rate was 40th among the states, it underscored slow job growth in state experience during the first several years following the recession, and that the state should reach its pre-recession job levels in the first half of 2015. However, the mix of those positions, the salaries, the compensation ranges have changed. And actually, looking at the most recent labor report in the first half of 14, actually, we've recovered to that pre-recession employment within the state, but again, that has mixed. In 2014, Idaho ranked 49th in per capita earnings, only ahead of Montana and behind Mississippi and Arkansas. And the mixture of those positions has changed. I know this is probably difficult to read, but prior to the recession in 2007, the number of jobs, those that earned under $30,000 represented 45% of the total number of jobs in the state. It's projected in 2012 and 13, they represented 47.4% of the jobs in the state. So the number of jobs that were being replaced are in the lower income bracket. And as a percentage of the total wages, in 2007, they represented 21.6% of total wages in the state. And in 2012 and 13, that increased to 30.6%. We're also seeing a reduction in the mid-range point. Those positions that are earning between $30,000 and $50,000, in 2007, they represented 46% of total jobs and 62% of total wages. And in 2012 and 13, they now represent 40% of the total jobs and 47% of the total wages earned. So there's a shrinking of the positions and a growth in both low-income and high-income positions, but a shrinking of that band in the middle. Showing the state employment here starting in 2003 on a strong growth trend, peaking here in 2006 as the recession began, officially hit the bottom here about 2010, and again here in 14 with the latest number, it has recovered and exceeded the pre-recession peak that was experienced in 2007. So employment has certainly recovered, and the state is mirroring that of the nation in recovery of jobs as a whole. Certainly the positions that are being replaced are different than what existed prior to the recession. If you look at the different metropolitan statistical areas within the state, and look at the time period from January of 2009 here to May of 2013 on the right, many of the metropolitan statistical areas are still at a fairly reduced level of activity prior to the recession. The two markets that have been expanding fairly rapidly, the red line indicates the Boise-Nampa metropolitan statistical area, and beginning in May of 2011, that market has significantly strengthened. The green line is the state as a whole, and blue is Idaho Falls. There's been a lot of activity related to the national labs in the Idaho Falls area, and that has helped support that region and has promoted growth. Coeur d'Alene most recently has seen a significant spike here beginning in January, but both Lewiston and Pocatello are still down at reduced levels compared to the prior levels of activity before the recession. Currently, right now, only one metropolitan statistical area in the state of Idaho is in a state of expansion, and that's the Boise-Nampa area, where Coeur d'Alene, Idaho Falls, Lewiston, and Pocatello are still in that stage of recovery. But things are obviously moving in the right direction right now. As we look at the region locally, at employment starting in 2003 to 2013, the state itself gained 9% total employment during that 10-year time period. Latah County is actually down about 1.5% total employment. At the same time, Whitman County has grown by 14.1% in total employment. So there has been substantial and significant employment growth that has happened within Whitman County, and some job loss that has occurred in Latah County during that same time period. If you look at the industries where most of these losses were experienced, and these are the different categories of employment. Certainly the professional, scientific, and technical services, we saw a 39% loss, 305 jobs during that 10-year time period in Latah County. Looking at other services, public administration, again, 126 jobs that were lost during that time period, and 113 in the government sector during that time period. There were some gains. Healthcare and social services, and healthcare obviously has been one of the industries that has been doing well during the recession time period. We had 309 jobs that were added in healthcare and social services. There were 247 jobs added in the administrative support, waste management, remediation. But overall, there was about 197 jobs that were lost during that time period. So 1.5% of the employment in Latah County. We actually added 45 jobs in manufacturing, which was a 13% increase, which was a good sign. And there were 97 jobs added in wholesale trade, which was a 49% increase as well. And again, the administrative and support services saw growth as well. As you look at Whitman County in that same time period between 2003 and 13 had a net gain of 14%, or about 2,100 jobs during that time period. Obviously, the most significant category was in the light manufacturing, the number one category for permitted activity in Pullman. During that time period, there were about 1,400 jobs that were added in the light manufacturing in Whitman County, which was 170% growth in that single category. So certainly that has been a strong influence in the economy and in the investment and construction activity that Pullman's experienced. Administrative support services was also a strong growth area, and 64 additional jobs, 84% growth. And again, the healthcare and social assistance, 327 jobs during that time period. That was a 31% growth, and again, that was another one of the high investment categories that Pullman experienced. So certainly correlates well with the overall activity. And then in the government, where Latah County saw 115 positions lost in that category, Whitman County gained 46 positions during that time period. So overall, that was a strong employment growth, certainly reflective of the investment activity we saw in Whitman County. Now, it's not all bad news. Things are heading in the right direction. If you look at current unemployment rates, so the blue bars indicate Latah County unemployment, and the red line here indicates total employment in Latah County. You see that we peaked at unemployment at 7.2% in 2010 and have continued to be decreasing to the latest number of 4.8% in Latah County. And total employment has increased from 16,137 in that time period up to 16,616, so roughly a 500 job gain during that time period. So the trends in those two phenomena are certainly moving in the right direction, and those are positive signs. If you look at projected employment growth over the next time period from 2014 to 2018, Latah County is expected to project 5.4% growth in employment, Whitman County at a 9.1%. And still fairly comparable to the state average as a whole, and showing better prospects as we look into the future. Also, as we look at per capita income over this time period, starting in 2002 to 2012, with red being Latah County, green the state of Idaho, and the purple line the United States, we had a dip in 2008 where per capita income in Latah County dropped from 31,000 down to 29,840. And since that time, we've actually had positive income growth. And for the first time, at least in this time period, we're slightly ahead of the state average. And it's probably reflective of those level of jobs and the compensation levels of those positions that have been added during that time period. But income growth has increased, per capita income has increased about 16% over the last 3 years, which is certainly a positive sign. Population growth as a whole, we typically grow on a 1 to 2% annual average, generally 1.5% per year, and that's been fairly consistent from 1980 to 90 to 2000, and slightly down in 2010 during that time period. And so that growth has been fairly consistent. We've been following on that fairly consistent line since that time period. And we've been fairly comparable with the region, showing the comparison of Moscow here in blue, Coeur d'Alene, Lewiston, Pullman, Clarkston, and Spokane. And so overall, we've been fairly consistent at that rate. But here in the 2013 census population estimates were just recently released. Moscow and Pullman were right around the same, about 0.1% during that time period. So it was actually a fairly small number. But again, those estimates are just that, and they're based on building starts and deaths and births and immigration records. So they are just an estimate at that time, but so showing a slightly slowing growth rate during that time period, both for the Moscow and Pullman areas. Again, on the average from 2010 to 13, we're about 1.5 to 3% in annual population growth. So that's pretty consistent with the historical trends for the city. Now, what has been somewhat unusual and different between Moscow and Pullman recently has been the enrollment activities happening at WSU and University of Idaho. If you look at University of Idaho enrollment from 1975 through 2010, we have an overall trend of a typical cycle where we have growth of enrollment, a little bit of a dip for a few years, growth, a little bit of a dip, and then continued growth. What has been somewhat unusual is the level of stability at the university has been longer than what we typically experience in the university's enrollment cycle. So typically we'd see some declining enrollment, hit a bottom, and you would see that grow back up. If you look at enrollment over the course of the last 10 years, from 2004 to 2013, during that time period, the university has lost 563 students. Sorry, it's hard to read. During that time period, where WSU has moved from 17,000 to 19,446 in 13. So WSU's added 1,906 students during that same time period. And that has a significant impact on the local economy. And obviously, education as the industry is one of the most prevalent industries on the Palouse. And certainly we see the impact of that in the local economies. One way to look at take a look at the business activity or the health. Polycom is a company that puts out an index where they rate all the metropolitan and micropolitan statistical areas to compare relative health and activity in those markets. And the formulas are used to determine the economic strength, to measure how the economy has behaved, and use a number of data sources to make that determination. There are really three groups that are utilized. The first group is really earnings. So earnings are all workers, their earnings, the jobs, the wages, per capita total worker earnings, per capita personal income, earnings by place of residence. So these are all the earnings elements that go into that consideration. Group two are the trailing industries. So it's going to be your construction and retail trade that follows the flow of money, and it's going to be those non-farm proprietorships. So the small business growth, the retail and construction that follow economic activity and follow money. And the third group, which is the negative group, which is our transfer payments. So that's annual per capita income, maintenance and welfare, Medicaid, and other transfer payments. And so they utilize those metrics to rate the metropolitan and the micropolitan statistical areas in the nation. As you looked at the metropolitan areas, there are 381 metropolitan areas in the nation. Boise and Nampa is ranked at 177. Lewiston is ranked at 290. Pocatello, 377. So you can see where they rank currently within the state of Idaho. And as we look at micropolitan statistical areas, so these are areas of fewer than 50,000 population, the Moscow MSA is currently ranked, and there's 577 of the micropolitan areas. It's currently ranked at 415 in the area, while Rexburg's at 458, Twin Falls 290, and Blackfoot. Now, if you look at these rankings in the region, so the red line represents Coeur d'Alene, the green line represents Lewiston, and the purple line here represents Pullman, and the blue line represents Moscow. It's kind of an interesting tale, and obviously it reflects the employment activity that we've seen in the two communities. Previously, Moscow in 2004 was ranked at 127 out of the 500 micropolitan statistical areas, and Pullman is sitting at 515. And during that time period, Pullman saw increased activity, and we met in the middle in about 2008. And both communities kind of followed a similar trajectory for about a 4-year time period. And then beginning in 2011, the Moscow saw a drop in the ranking, going from 302 down to 415, while Pullman has continued to grow. And certainly is representative of the construction activity and the investment that Pullman has seen in those last 3 years of that commercial investment. It's interesting when you look at that and compare it to the enrollment activity that's happened in the two communities. So Steve Peterson put out a report last fall assessing the impact of the University of Idaho on the local economy. The importance of that student growth and some statements that were included in that study discuss the importance of student growth on the regional economy, and that every student at U of I, every student at U of I represents 57,000 in annual sales, 31,000 in wage and salary earnings, and 3/4 of a job in the community. If you were to look at the 563 students that were lost during that time period, that's $82 million in annual sales that are lost, $17 million in lost wages, and 422 jobs in total. If you were to plot the Polycom ratings of the city of Moscow with U of I enrollment, you can kind of obviously see the impact that the university has on the local economy. As we have seen increases in enrollment, that activity has translated to strengthen the local economy, and as we see decreases in enrollment, that's reflected in the market as well. Comparatively, looking at Pullman and WSU, as you look at the trends of Pullman's rankings over that same time period and WSU enrollment, it's clear that the universities have a significant impact on the local economy. And the number of students that we have on the Palouse is significant to the health and activity that we see. Okay, so that's just the economic side of things. I'll cover quickly on the historical construction activity. We're not that dissimilar to Pullman in the sense, on average, we permit about 121 units per year. Typically, while Pullman may be at 60 range, 41 units is our historical average. We typically have two-family dwellings at about 14 per year and about 66 multifamily units on average per year. Obviously, we had a high construction activity between 2000 and 2009. In that time period, we had just under 1,800 dwelling units permitted for construction. That was a significantly higher activity than we had historically. And somewhat similar, our historical commercial construction activity is about 6.1 million over the last 24 years on average. And so they're not all that unusual. As you look at the national market, obviously the single family sector has been the hardest hit sector beginning in 2005 down to 2009. The number of new housing starts in single family has substantially dropped. And that has been reflected in our starts as well. So the purple line here represents the total dwelling units permitted for construction. The green line is the multifamily units, and not unlike Pete's slide, we do have our periods of peak construction, and they tend to occur on about a 9-year cycle. This time period, really from 2001 to 2009, we had substantial activity, and we were permitting up to 300 units per year during that time period in combining single-family and multifamily dwelling units. Since 2009, obviously we've had lower activity. We have been the single family that's on the blue line. We have typically been about half of average, so typically we're 40 to 45 units per year. We've been running in the mid-20s during that time period, and we did hit 30 housing units last year, showing some growth. So far to the calendar year, we have had 8 single-family homes permitted, 18 multifamily, but we do have another 100 multifamily units under review right now that will be permitted here shortly. Taking a look again at the last 10-year period from 2014 years, from 2000 to 2014, you see that high level of activity that occurred in that 2003 to 7 time period, and some reduction in activity since that point. For commercial construction, we actually have been fairly stable. In the last few years, we've had pretty continuous activity that has exceeded our historical average of 6.1 million. So far, through May of this year, from January to May, we're at 6.5 million in commercial activity. We had 5.7 in 2013, and we had about 10 million in both 2011 and 2012. So we've had strong commercial activity over the course of the last few years, and that appears to be continuing. So just to talk about some recent and current projects. One that was significant to us was the EMSI project, the remodel of the Daily News building on Jackson Street in the downtown core. That's a high job growth company located in the downtown core, looking for expansion from 60 employees currently to 100 to 120 employees. And so that's a significant new project that we're very excited about. Revolution Motorsports constructed a new sales facility, 11,000 square foot facility on Almond Street. It's under construction and should be complete in the next 60 days. And so that's been a great investment we'd like to see. We've also had Jimmy John's is proposing a new 3,000 square foot commercial building on the corner of 6th and Jackson. We expect to receive the plans with that in the next 2 weeks. So we're anxious to see that project. We've also had Starbucks has done the expansion remodel in the former Sherwin-Williams building in the Palouse Mall parking lot building pad, and that project is nearing completion. And the University Inn is undergoing right now a current significant expansion and remodel activity. So we're continuing to see investment within the community that we're excited about. We also have other community projects, much like Pete indicated, the high school reconstruction. Right now, the Moscow School District is going through about $6 million of remodels on existing elementary, Moscow Middle School, and the high school facility that total about $6 million in construction. We have the Moscow School District Community Playfield project, that is a $3.2 million athletic complex under construction right now, slated for completion by September of this year. We also have a number of significant university capital projects in the pipeline, including the Integrated Research and Innovation Center, which is a $49 million total project cost, the remodel of the College of Education at $1.7 million, and a new aquaculture lab under construction here shortly at $1.4 million. So it's good to see that construction activity, that capital investment into the university in order for it to expand and attract students, faculty, and research. We also have 4 residential subdivisions that have been previously approved that we expect to begin construction. We're getting fairly low in residential lots, single-family residential lots in Moscow, and so we anticipate that we'll see construction activity within those 4 subdivisions beginning this fall into spring of next year. So I guess looking back, certainly the Great Recession has had significant impacts on economies of all scales. During that same time period, the University of Idaho has faced and experienced reduced state funding and somewhat stable enrollment activities, not experiencing some of the growth we've had in the past, and that has been borne out to have some impacts on our local economy. Also during that time period, Schweitzer's significant employment growth, as well as WSU's strength in enrollment, has certainly benefited the region and helped mitigate some of the employment losses that we have seen in other sectors. And as we function as a region, that is an asset that where one of us does well, that certainly we all benefit. In looking ahead, we're certainly excited to see President Saban taking over the leadership role at the University of Idaho and Mayor Lambert with the City of Moscow. There's a great opportunity for institutional assessment, realignment, and reintegration in the university. We also see enhanced collaboration as a region, and certainly the Moscow-Pullman Airport realignment and the work done between both the City of Moscow and the City of Pullman to address the local match requirements and to try to make that project a reality has certainly been a good fostering of regional cooperation, and we continue to see increased interest from companies looking for higher quality of life and the amenities that our region has, and so I think we will continue to see that bear out. Certainly, go Vandals, go Cougs. These institutions are incredible assets, and we need to support them in any manner that we can, and you can see the direct impact that they have on our local economy. So with that, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity and turn it over to Michelle.
Thank you.